Being honest, after watching the first 10 minutes of Kaden Pressy's interview, part one or part two, as Partners in True Crime announces, I think it was quite interesting and somewhat important, but a lot clearer as well, easier to follow. Welcome to those watching right now. Welcome back to the Noah Presgrove case, looking at the latest news and discussions. This time round, the latest analysis catching up with Kaden Pressy and his interview. Now, I called it part one, or you could call it part two. I'm not quite sure, to be honest, because how it was worded at the start of the video was, this is following on from the last interview, the last 10 minutes. That makes sense, because when I watched the interview part one of Kaden, it ended abruptly. There was still talking in the background. So you can see there was a continuation on. That would make me believe that that part one interview was done all in one, well, not in one take, but in one sitting. And then that 10 minutes that was cut off was then included in the next follow-up video. As for part two, the literal part two interview, I'm guessing that hasn't happened yet. I know Partners in True Crime, the guy said, he made reference to this being part two, but he said it was part one at the start. Maybe he got mixed up with his words. So we've not truly seen part two yet, I guess. But what did happen was an alternative guest came on for the rest of the show. Now, I didn't listen to her because I only wanted to focus in on Kaden specifically from the horse's mouth. So hopefully people understand that. You can let me know your thoughts down below. I've only got so many notes, bullet points today because in 10 minutes, there's only so much you can note down. But I would actually argue and say in 10 minutes, I probably made more notes than I have previous times. And that speaks volume. The clarity, the way it was delivered, the message, even responding back to key events which you may have not seen or saw, but still acknowledge them. That's all good to see. And that's probably because the interviewers, Partners in True Crime, asked more the right questions this time round and follow-up questions to Kaden's points, whereas that might have been lacking in the initial first video. So, in honesty, if I look back at it holistically, part one interview, including the second video, which had the final 10 minutes of part one, when looking at it collectively, while still there may be some rough patches, of course, the last 10 minutes actually saved the situation, in my opinion, by acknowledging other events, by adding on. And I'll give you an example later on today. Be sure to stick around. And also, it's important for you to stick around because we actually need to do a bit of an analysis of footage, photos, maybe even Jasmine Milan, to do with the patio area, the front porch, right? We've seen it documented, we've seen it up close. It's actually a key important area within the case and timeline. And it's a comment Kaden made about it onwards post Noah's death. We definitely need to look at that, so don't go anywhere. As I said, for those that are watching this live premiere, share your thoughts, opinions, reactions in the live chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. If you're not watching live, but you're on catch-up, you can leave your comments and thoughts down below under this video. And fingers crossed, YouTube doesn't delete comments. It's getting out of hand. It's absolutely ridiculous. And let me just also note that still, my comments keep unpinning themselves. So when I say, look down below in the comment section, you will find my pinned comment with additional links if you want to support this channel. It keeps unpinning itself. So people aren't able to see it, or you know, when they scroll down and they look, it's not there. But it was to begin with. The following day, it's unpinned itself. The hell's going on there? And as for notifications, more people than ever now aren't even being notified. And the reason why it's frustrating and disheartening is I could do some very important critical videos. My stamina could be more than a Mustang horse or whatever they're called out there. And at the end of the day, if I'm too active, if I go in too hard, if I go in too deep and I'm too fast, maybe not everybody sees them. maybe people forget about them. And it feels like that was a waste, because the whole point is spreading awareness. And I just want to add in a little counterpoint to what people say in general in life, okay? Because there are ignorant humans out there. So it's just to set the record clear, and just for me to give a counterpoint. When I think of it, certain times, some humans out there, strangers, can say, oh, you're doing it for clicks. Oh, you're doing it for views. That's all it's about. And it's like, hold on, wait a minute. You know, when it comes to spreading awareness, awareness equals requires views and clicks. Views and clicks equal awareness. Self-explanatory. It's the same with in real life, putting posters out, flyers, leaflets. You know, oh, you're doing that for clicks and views, or you're doing that for people's responses to get a reaction out of them. No, it's to spread awareness, pass the message on. The difference is online, it's online, but it reaches more people. It's that simple, and yet humans out there cannot comprehend it. Maybe they need to attend Dr. Ref's lectures more often and read through those scriptures, because there's a few pages missing, isn't there? Anyway, let's focus back in on the Noah Presgrove case. If you are interested in coverage about the case and alternative stuff, including a text message revealed just last night to do with Carter Combs, a violent text revealed, and it's only just come about recently because it was only posted recently, the message. You want to see that dark side behind them? You see that eye symbol, top right corner of the screen right now? You hover over that, you'll find that video, and you can check it out if you haven't already, once you've watched this. And there'll also be a playlist as well if you want to catch up there. So, with that all said and done, to break into this final 10 minutes of the part 1 interview, that's what I'm going to call it, when listening in, at not any point did I hear anything about shorts. So basically, when this interview, or whatever you want to call it, came out just recently, so Tuesday, and it would have been a bit of time zone difference as well, probably last night when I was doing my video, and that would have been, it would have been Tuesday, wouldn't it? I can't even keep up to date. But Tuesday, I was doing a live premiere. People were commenting saying, oh yeah, Kaden Pressy, the interview. And then a wave of questions started coming out about Jack and the shorts. Jack passing on the black shorts to Kaden Pressy, the brother to Noah, afterwards, and they were washed as well. I heard that in the past. Why has it only come about or resurfaced right now? I'm not sure if it's a coincidence or there's a correlation between Kaden Pressy's interview, the final 10 minutes, coming out as of Tuesday night, or whatever time it was on Tuesday, and then when I did my video afterwards, people were influenced by that and started talking about it once again, or maybe they heard it for the first time ever. As I said, I've heard about it in the past, not exactly who returned the shorts, Jack himself, but the shorts were returned back to the likes of Kaden Pressy. I've heard that in the past. Why is it only being talked about now? Or, in other words, why has it resurfaced now? Is it because of the Kaden Pressy interview? And the reason why I asked that question is because when listening into that Kaden Pressy interview, anticipating to hear about shorts, black shorts being returned back, I didn't hear any word about it. The hell's going on? Have people been watching something else which I haven't seen? Are people referring to a previous interview? Are people referring to the interview, but not from Kaden's words, but from what Jody said in that video? I want to hear from the horse's mouth, right? If it's not from the horse's mouth, maybe it's just not good enough. So what's the whole situation there? If anyone can clarify, clear it up, that would be good. And as for that other guy, was it Chad Covington or something? Yeah, I tried searching for him and the post. Bloody hell. Not exactly easy to find. Someone said, look at his recent post. Oh yeah, that's what I'll do on the page. It literally wasn't there, right? Luckily, Reddit did a repost recently. Clear, easy to find. Boom, boom. Exactly. And I'll be taking a look at that another time, but we need to focus in with Kaden to tie up any loose ends and to finish what one started. right? The analysis of the interview. So as I said, first announced when it came on, this is the last 10 minutes of the first interview, etc., etc. But the host, the interviewers, you want to call them that, were talking about the impact of the initial part one interview of Kaden. How there's been heat, there's been a blowback, people have been very mean and nasty online, and even victim blaming Noah Presgrove. Me personally, I've not seen any victim blaming as in recent time. I mean, if we're talking about at the start, or more so when I got involved at the start, discussions going about saying, oh, Noah was drunk and, he was reckless, and if he was sober, he may have survived. Why are you blaming the victim there? That's the counterpoint what people were saying. Another one, oh, Noah was drunk, and drink driving, not exactly a good combination if an accident did happen and it turned out to be fatal, in the background, let's just put it that way. Reckless, irresponsible, shouldn't have been doing that. And then people could say, well, that's victim blaming. And then the other key one where, oh, Noah's supposedly flirting with people. If anyone did feel uncomfortable and there was like some kind of lashing out, or when Noah supposedly called Avery a fat beep, and then there was a reaction after that, and then people said, yeah, but even if Noah was like this or that, or said this or that, it doesn't warrant being killed. That's overkill, that's gone too far. So they're the examples, I guess, of victim blaming. As of recently, such as with that interview of Kaden Pressy, I don't remember seeing it, okay? Does anyone else? One thing I do know for certain is this fucking tripod is wonky today. What the hell is going on? It's annoying me. But let me know your thoughts. Has there been a rise, an influx, a return of victim blaming with Noah Presgrove and why he died? People blaming him as in he deserved it, or what do you expect? That type of mentality. I've just not seen it recently. Is that because it's been on Facebook and I've not been on Facebook as much? Does anyone know? Feel free to elaborate down below. But in terms of the initial blowback, the heat, the criticism, mean comments online, yeah, I can agree with that, I guess. That has come from the first interview of Kaden Pressy. It's one of those things where what comes with good comes with bad. When you put yourself out there in the public eye, expect to be critiqued and this and that, and it's not going to be a good situation. But you'd hope that it wouldn't be as hostile as you'd expect when it's being put out there to the general public, and the general public aren't directly involved in the case. They're there to listen, learn, and work things out. As for the key individuals within the case, maybe you could expect criticism or blowback from them if they're not too happy with how Kaden has been acting or what he said, such as revealing possible truth in the matter, highlighting lightness in dark areas which may have been covered up or kept quiet by other key individuals in the case. Yeah, you can expect a bit of tugging and pulling there. From the general public, though, has there been a level of blowback and heat? And I think that's what the host, Partners in True Crime, were getting at just in general, right? And when I did look on Facebook, maybe here and there is the odd criticism or conflicts with one another about Kaden or directly aimed at Kaden. I think it's a mixture. Where do I come in all of this? Because let's be realistic, I was critical of the first interview. What I would say is, after watching this last 10 minutes, it's better now, in my mindset. Not perfect, but better now because of these additional details, how it was easier to follow. Even when he was talking, he seemed more comfortable and relaxed. And take in mind, if it's the last 10 minutes of that first interview, he probably had enough time to warm up. And once he got past the talking bit of the highway, the body, the scene, he wasn't as emotional. There wasn't as many jump cuts. I think there was only like one or two. These are all positives, right? And because it's all from the same interview, that's what makes it better. But because Partners in True Crime cut the 10 minutes out, there was context missing. There is still context missing even when you include the whole footage together, such as the earliest stage of the interview, no talk about Jack and Noah arguments on a Saturday, things like that. lacking context in terms of sobering up, but still not being able to drive Noah back afterwards. Bits and bobs like that, they've not been cleared up. Maybe with time, when there is a right place and a right time, it can be more clear. But at this moment, there were some other things which were just as important that were acknowledged. So that's something, right? That's better. Some people could argue and say that the interviewers, with breaking it up the last 10 minutes, it kind of caused a bit of a disconnect, maybe alienated some people. Me personally, I don't know why the final 10 minutes were cut out of part one interview. If it's all one interview in one sitting, granted maybe edits and jump cuts along the way, if it's part one interview, the very first interview with that individual, it should be full length. Well, it could be edited, to make sure it's not too long, but, if there's like final 10 minutes in the next video, it should have been included in the first one. Well, it's only 10 minutes more. I'm just surprised it wasn't added in at the time. Does anyone know why? So, yeah, when you look at this part, you get more context. So if you've seen part one of the interview, the 59-minute one, be sure to catch up on the next video, which the guy in the video said part two, but really it was still part one. Make sure to catch up on it yourself. But I do have notes in front of me. I've highlighted a couple already. You can let me know what you think about the situation. But yeah, I do agree that there's been resistance, there's been a blowback, there's been some kind of heat ever since Kaden made his public recall of events. And whilst, yeah, he's done it on Facebook here and there with a few posts made, to show his face, his voice, to put himself out there publicly, you can argue and say that was brave of him, but also good of him, considering how difficult it could be to do and also recall everything after doing it so many times in the past and having to go back over all the negative events over and over again. Yeah. And yeah, you could argue and say there's a bit of leniency as why there might be some mistakes along the way or forgetting the odd piece here and there. But you can also be balanced and say maybe context was lacking, which is a bit of a limitation, and certain times weren't exactly made clear, or the language and wording behind it wasn't exactly clear to follow. But in terms of this 10-minute interview, it was a lot clearer, better wording, more simple. And that's what's needed, right? So, whilst I was a bit critical of the part one, it was for good reason, just like how I would with anyone, right? No special treatment there, or no witch hunt either. You could argue and say, besides Justin Roy, and besides Jack Newton, because he did it on a more official news thing and it was only talking about specific things and it was very short, and that's referenced later on here. Kaden is really one of the only few, maybe only ones, correct me if I'm wrong there, to have put himself out there publicly and to say what he knows, what he remembers. Because whilst you get the other people that are very vocal and gobby, maybe Stevie Howard or Sarah Long and a couple of other people along the way, whilst they might be very vocal online on social media behind a screen, they don't do it in an actual video or interview. And they've probably got the voice for it. They've probably got a lot to say, whether it's the truth or not. Why haven't they done? Or why haven't they reached out to someone? Is it because they don't want to? Is it because they don't think or feel that they need to, or they should be forced to? I wonder. So really, Kaden is one of the only few to put himself out there. Take in mind, when Justin Roy did his interview, there was really no blowback, no heat, no issues. So why was it all directed on Kaden then? It's probably because certain things what we listened to didn't quite make sense, or we've just never heard before. Just like my initial reaction, that could be the same with many other people out there. It's just how other people reacted, and maybe some overreacted. And I would say, yeah, the Kaden interview could have been a catalyst to sparking new energy, but maybe not for the right reasons, intensity, etc. But it seems to have boiled over more so amongst people, general public, discussing over the interview, arguing over the interview, having a go at one another. So whilst the first initial resistance could have been aimed at Kaden, ever since it's been more directed towards one another at the general public, having debates, discussions and arguments, and in the process additional heat as well from people claiming to be silenced or blocked or timed out elsewhere. So, bit of a war zone, a little bit divided, I guess. Granted, there are still things I need to look into, right? Whether it be to do with Kaden, this interview, or additional stuff elsewhere, but I can only look at one thing at a time. But I guess the good thing is, with other cases in the background kind of being resolved, such as the Jay Slater one, I can focus more on her. A video or two a day, that's what I'll try and do, but take in mind, got to check the momentum. The momentum has kind of been lost in recent time, and with YouTube as well screwing me over. If people don't see the videos, then there is no awareness, or there's lacking of it, and that's shit, isn't it? So hopefully that can be resolved. I think the video last night reached enough people. Feel free to share it if you have seen it already. And yeah, I think recently Justin Roy did a repost of my interview analysis, which was positive to see. I guess that's good. We'll see how this one goes and what people think of it. And the reason why I'm doing this video now is because I did do a poll, and I think from what I can remember seeing, majority wanted to see it. At first, there was a bit of reluctancy from some, but maybe that's because this interview wasn't what people, I guess, anticipated. Oh, only 10 minutes, and then the rest is to do with some other woman. Oh, we thought it was going to be a full-length one. But regardless, 10 minutes or an hour long, as I said, this 10-minute interview more interesting than maybe an hour-long one where you're trying to do catch-up and listen in, and it's hard to understand and follow. That's just my opinion, okay? As said, I'm laying everything out so people clearly understand me, because I do not want any misunderstandings. There's been enough of that in the past, right? Some of you will know very well. So, with that being said, besides heat and blowback, the next thing that was mentioned, and the very first response from Kaden, was to do with at what point, what was the factor, the catalyst, the deciding factor as to why you unfriended or distanced yourself from Jack Newton. Said you were friends in the past. We saw in the part 1 interview, Kaden said in the future he maybe hopes to be friends with Jack once again. So indirectly that implies that they're not friends at this moment in time, and they haven't been for months, however long that is. So when the interviewer said, at what point was your deciding factor, Kaden referenced when Jack Newton participated on News Nation. Now, is that the one where he's on the side of the highway with the cap on and the sunglasses? Maybe. I think I still need to catch up on that. And he's given his thoughts as to what happened, cause of death. Kaden said after he watched that, he felt different about Jack. He wanted, not in his words, but he wanted to distance himself for the time being. Maybe it could change in the future, but at that moment, distance one another. Fair enough. But Kaden did say that when he listened to that interview of Jack Newton, it sounded like it was scripted. In quotes, he had it scripted in his head, such as with the hit and run form of cause of death. If it's scripted, I mean, it's not the first time people have said something like that. Towards Jack, maybe. More so others, I guess. People in the community, besides a key witness like Kaden, other people in the community, general public, have said, this sounds scripted from that individual. Not Kaden, but others in the case, right? So the more people that are independently in a consensus with the same idea and outlook, that it's scripted, would make you think it's been rehearsed. And if it's scripted and rehearsed, who wrote the script? Who approved of the script in the background? There are a certain set number of key individuals in the case, partygoers, friends, or family members have like a pact, a seal of what they can and can't say, what can be disclosed and what can't be. Makes you think, right? I guess with Kaden Pressy, almost like being an outsider now to those individuals, because he's speaking out independently from what he knows of, from what he saw and from what he remembered, he could be seen or treated as the black sheep when it comes to the partygoers or the other friends or the other parents' outlooks towards Kaden, hence in recent time, resistance, right? Because it wasn't that long ago back then that you saw on Facebook, people were saying how Kaden was being hounded, harassed. Some were going as far as saying death threats. I don't know how true that is, but bad things going on. And, you know, it's a rough situation to be in, of course. Has it happened since? Who knows, right? But if you do start speaking out and you're not going with the script, you see how people react there. That could even apply on like a news broadcast. If you're a news anchor, you go off script, you could get in trouble. There could be some kind of repercussions, but you may be doing it because you're being honest or you've had enough of the darkness and the BS. So even though it was back then, some time ago, when Jack did that interview, has he done many since? Not from the looks of it. Do you think he would want to? I don't know. Would there be as much backlash if the likes of Jack or Stevie or Sarah or Jasmine or Avery or Carter did an interview with whoever, such as partners in true crime? Would there be a backlash equal to when Kaden did it? I wonder. I think there could be more of a backlash, to be honest. Because if there's more if the same amount is said by an unsavoury character, there'd be more chance that majority of the general public will be in consensus with one another. Whereas the situation with Kaden, and there's any misunderstandings or disagreements, people are more conflicted and divided because they all want to look up to Kaden and believe in him. But if some have a form of doubt or skeptical, then that can trigger others that believe in Kaden, and then there's like an inner civil war. So, you know, it is what it is. It will fade out eventually, but at the moment it's still quite heated. So, do any of you think that when Jack has done interviews, it sounded scripted, like how Kaden thought, in his opinion? Do you agree with that? Next thing mentioned, Kaden said that this was to do with the shower situation. So this question was asked by Partners in True Crime, which was a good question. It's an important moment. I believe it wasn't mentioned at all in the very first video, part 1 interview. So stuff like that lacking, it made people think, it made me think, but it was kind of cleared up in this video, which is a positive. So they said, did you hear about a shower? Did you see the shower take place? Was anyone wet? And Kaden said, I did hear Noah say he was going to have a shower earlier on. To say earlier on could imply maybe 0, 0, 0, 0 or 1, 2 in the morning, probably before 2 in the morning, because that's when Kaden initially went to sleep. You could even go as far back and say earlier on what Kaden means is Sunday night, right? Sunday night going into early hours of Monday morning. In between then, that Kaden did hear Noah say he was going to have a wash. Why didn't Noah have a wash earlier on then at the time he said he was going to? Is it because he got distracted? He got involved in other activities? Maybe. The reason why it's interesting to hear from Kaden is because he's acknowledging that supposedly it was going to happen. It's just that he didn't see it happen. So yeah, that's interesting. And whilst other party goes and other people and articles and news, etc., has talked about the shower a lot, and some have said there's video footage of it, but we've not seen it then. Okay, there's a consensus that he had a shower, but the timing of it was important. Was it before or was it after a significant event, such as an ATV side-by-side incident, if it flipped over, all dirty, humidity, sweat, dirt sticking to you, wanting to wash it off, etc., having a shower, kind of makes sense. Assisted by people, I mean, if you're not in the right frame of mind, physically not good either because of being drunk, well then you probably do need to be helped, escorted out, escorted in to the place. And you can imagine if you're drunk and you're going upstairs, that can be a hazard. I don't know if their bathroom is upstairs or downstairs, I'm just assuming, right? And even if you was to have a shower or wash, drunk in there, you could slip, you could bang your head, you could cause some serious injury, maybe even die. So for someone to assist or people to assist in Noah having a wash, it kind of makes sense. Is it more likely that a partygoer who's into nursing or caring for people of any age, whether that be an assistant or a full-on carer, anyone at the party that fits under one of those roles or titles, would they have been more forthcoming in assisting Noah in having a wash? Because they have that experience. They've done it for older people. Is that a little factor? Just to throw in there, maybe? Does that apply to Jasmine Milan? But isn't she just an assistant, not a full-on individual with certain roles? But, you know, if you've got a little bit of experience, maybe you can understand the situation more, and you might be more likely to say, yeah, I'll help. Because in other situations, some people could say, ew, I'm not doing that, no. But those that may do that as their role or job, it might be second nature, normal to them, no issues, no big deal, I'll assist, I'll help, wash, wipe, dry you down. Just thought I'd throw that in there. But to refer back to the importance of Kaden saying he heard earlier on Monday or earlier on Sunday night, probably that. For Noah to say he needed a shower earlier on, did it happen earlier on or was it delayed? For Noah to even talk about having a shower earlier on would imply that things happened earlier on as well. The ATV incident and any other means of getting messy or dirty. I don't know if that has been cleared up in the past where people were saying, yeah, well, the ATV happened on a Sunday or a Saturday, whatever. It might have already been cleared up, but it's just in terms of the shower situation, had to said, not when I say they, I don't mean Kaden, I just mean partygoers, people online, reposting things, news articles, quotes, etc. Just a collection of stuff from the night or early hours of the morning. Originally, it was portrayed that Noah supposedly had a wash Monday morning, really quite early on. And when Kaden added in by saying in his original Facebook statement that he went to sleep at 3 in the morning, more so to be clear now, he went back to sleep around 3 in the morning after being awoken at 2:43 when he initially tried going to sleep at 2 in the morning. At the end of the day, Kaden did miss out time because he was simply asleep, and that's normal, okay? I've not seen anyone blaming Kaden for going to sleep, right? Oh, you went to sleep, you missed out so much, how could you do that? I've not seen that level of pettiness, right? That's something positive. But originally, how it was all pieced together, I was thinking, oh, did the shower happen before 3:30, but occurred after 3 in the morning? So it would have been a tight window of the ATV incident, then having a shower, and then wanting to sleep in one of the girls' rooms, then a bit of conflict or frustration there, and then storming off, and then maybe an argument breaking out, and then within that 10-11 minute time difference of 3:30, Jasmine Milan going onto the front porch to announce that Noah's missing in a Snapchat post. It seemed like a very tight window, right? But for Kaden in this interview, this follow-on, to say that he heard Noah was going to have a shower earlier on would make you think whatever time that is earlier on, whether that means Monday morning earlier on or Sunday evening, would mean that before that, that's when other things happened. And if that really was the case, and with Kaden saying it probably happened when he was asleep, likely, then what's the time difference of when Noah announced he was going to have a shower to when he actually did have a shower, to when he then wanted to sleep in one of the person's rooms, to then when there was conflict and then he supposedly left? If the last time Noah was at the property was at like 3:30 before he left for good, supposedly, from before 3:30 back to sometime Sunday night, how many hours is that in terms of time difference? Because it would make more sense if it was a tight window and back-to-back events. You're in an ATV, it tips over, if it did, get all dirty, you need to dust yourself, may wash yourself, but you're not in the right frame, you get guided to the place, may get washed or you wash yourself, and then it's like, oh, Okay, I probably need to go to sleep now. You're drunk. You need to sleep it off. Sober up. And Noah maybe adamant he wants to sleep here or there, with or without someone, and that's rejected. And in that short burst, it's like, oh, damn, and then frustrated. I'm assuming that earlier on, before that, he may have asked to have a lift back home, or was that after, in the process of when he was about to leave and walk off? Depending what order, it would make more sense, right? Just like the Jack Newton situation, that if you eliminated all of the information and supposed facts from earlier on in Monday morning, and you only focused on at 5:53, Jack woke up, went down the highway to go fishing and meet up with his father, and in doing so, along down the highway, he then came across the scene of Noah's body and found out that way firsthand. If that was the original story, and if that was the truth, it would make so much more sense and it'd be easier to follow. But obviously that's not the case, because the reality is Jack has lied here and there. Jack has claimed to be asleep here when he's not, and then some other points along the way. So that's what makes the situation a bit more complex. With what Kaden has mentioned here about the shower situation occurring earlier on, or at least being talked about earlier on, right, just discussed from what he heard, it makes us question then, what's the exact time Noah had a shower then? Was it hours before 3:30 in the morning? Was it like 10, 20-minute difference till the 3:30 timestamp? And, people could say, well, if Jack has lied about this and that, and he's the one that's stating it's 3:30 in the morning when Noah left, how true is that? Well, all I can say about that particular situation and timestamp is, I've not seen it contested. Other times may have been contested, where like Jack said, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, went to sleep, 3 in the morning, whatever. And Kaden said, well, when I was there with my own eyes, Jack was awake. Okay, that clears that up. There was a counterpoint by another witness telling the supposed truth. Fair enough. But in terms of the timestamp of 3:30 when Noah supposedly left the property or attempted to leave, with everything else happening before that, that would make sense. But I've not seen any counterpoints. Some people may have said, how do we know it's 3:30? Maybe he left earlier. Maybe he left later. How do we actually know? How can we be so certain when it's Jack, of all people, stating that? Whilst, yes, I can understand people being sceptical, I've just not seen any other witnesses give counter timestamps. That's why I refer to 3:30 as the last known time of when Noah was on site or in sight of others at the party within, right? If he's leaving and walking away, how far did he make it, and why would he? Well, it's kind of clear. He wanted to leave. He needed to be driven back. No one would drive him back, which is very unfortunate. So what other option does he have? To walk back home or attempt to? As silly as that sounds, that's one way of looking at it. The only counterpoint you can argue and say is, when it comes to Noah Presgrove, okay, he wanted to sleep supposedly in one of the bedrooms of one of the girls, with or without them, and that was turned down and he got supposedly frustrated. Well, what about the likes of Mikey or was it Brylan, or Mikey or Isaac, where one was sleeping on the couch, a chair, the other one was sleeping on the floor? And yeah, they did switch up positions afterwards, which is a bit skeptical, I guess, like what Kaden said and what he saw himself as witnessed. But, early hours of Monday morning, Noah Presgrove, inside of the house, couldn't sleep in one of the bedrooms. Why not just sleep on the floor, just like how some of the other people did? Okay, maybe Noah didn't want to do that, but I was going to say it's safer being in the house sleeping than it is being out in the open in the dark. But, considering what's happened to Noah, there's a chance that whoever in the house or nearby could have been responsible. But the longer you stayed on site, the worse it could have been. But it's not exactly true saying that, because even if he did try leaving, just based on that theory, bad things still happened to him. So whether he stayed or tried leaving, I don't think he would have had a good outcome, being honest, right? The only possible chance of survival, well, two chances of possible chances of survival would be either someone did drive him back earlier on when he requested, he would have been safe up to a point. Second chance of survival would have been if he had his own vehicle with him at the time, like on the Saturday, but he didn't because supposedly his vehicle was somewhat damaged. My question is, was that vehicle tampered with on the Saturday to ensure that when Noah was to return back to the party the following day, if invited by the likes of Jack, they would have him trapped on site, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide? That can be a standalone theory-based video. Whilst I've talked about it already now, not everyone's going to see, hear or remember it, so I'll do it as a separate video in the future. But these are the thoughts which I'm thinking of at this moment in time at least. So, really got focused in with the whole shower situation, but it's important, right? People say the shower situation is important because that could have been a key moment of washing off evidence. I don't know too much about that, though, to be honest with you. But I do think the shower situation is important as to when it happened, because then it almost determines possibly as to when other things happened. You know, the ATV event, supposedly, things like that. It would make sense to have a shower after you got dirty. If you have a shower before you get dirty, it seems a bit silly. So that's why you take that in mind when looking at the timeline. The next thing that was mentioned by Kaden was that Monday, 2:43 a.m, 43 minutes of sleep time, then being awoken by his mother, a phone call about the cousin wandering off with a friend and the concern behind it. It was resolved, it was okay. But at the time of when Kaden was woken up, at that time, he was responding directly to Partners in True Crime about the question of, at that time you woke up, did you see anyone wet? And we're not talking about anyone who's wet themselves or had wet dreams. We're talking about, is anyone wet? Wet hair, wet body, wet face, wet shirt, as in, has anyone had a wash at that time of when you was awake and conscious? And Kaden said, nope, I didn't see anyone wet, right? Then 6 a.m. onwards. I think it's 6 a.m. onwards because I'm sure Kaden said at around 6:30. 6:30 a.m. Renee Milan supposedly arrived at the party house to clear things up and to move those guns out. And then by 7 in the morning, Kaden said, we all left. And I'm assuming Avery and Carter remained because that's their house. That's what they were living at the time at least. So it's 6:30 a.m, around the time of when Kaden was picking up beer cans and tidying up there. Kaden said that was his idea, his choice to do so. He wasn't influenced by Renee Milan. Around that time, Kaden said when going outside on the porch, the concrete was wet. Now, there are questions regarding that as to who caused the wetness and how long it was there for, and the temperature as well. We will get into that later. I just want to finish off the rest of this interview analysis, and then we're going to head straight over to photos and even Jasmine Milan. So don't go anywhere, remain to stick around. You'll find out why. It's a significant event. I've highlighted it as well. Now, some people could say, wow, a wet patch, that's so important. Well, it kind of is, okay? And there's different theories, reasonings, and outcomes. I want to give a full perspective, or at least try to, so I'll do that soon. But next point mentioned was, didn't hear or see the side-by-side accident when it tipped over. And that was what Kaden said. He didn't see or hear it, at least when he was awake, but it could have happened when he was asleep. That's what he said himself. Okay, fair enough. Now, if you was asleep and there was an ATV incident, would there have been a loud noise which would have woken you up? Would it have woken you up the same way as if a phone was ringing by the side of you? Maybe not if the ATV is outside, whereas the situation with the phone ringing, that's by the side of him. So, different sounds and how it travels. Would there have been any noise from other people, like cheering it on or acting all shocked or surprised? I wonder. And how much noise would have been made when or if Noah was being escorted back in to then go for a shower? Supposedly Kaden was asleep during all of that. Fair enough, Kaden's been honest there from what he knows and what he doesn't know, but it's nice to see him acknowledge what he doesn't know or what he's not aware of, because in part 1 interview, the original video that we saw, there was a couple of events which weren't highlighted nor brought up by Kaden. But like how some viewers were saying, Kaden's only talking about what he remembers or knows. Maybe the counterpoint could be, when looking back now, that, yeah, that's understandable. What the interviewers should have done was mention the events that he doesn't know or can't remember, but still ask him about it to see if he acknowledges hearing about it online or through other people. That would have been the best way around it. And basically, that's what the interviewers did in this final 10 minutes of the interview. The shower situation, the ATV situation. Kaden may have not seen or heard it himself directly, or not specifically, but he does remember hearing about it mentioned elsewhere. So acknowledging it is a good thing. And to be honest, even though Kaden didn't see Noah have a shower and didn't see other people have a shower or where, Kaden did say he heard Noah talk about having a shower earlier on. So Kaden has provided indirect extra details upon stuff he probably wouldn't have mentioned in that interview if it wasn't for the interviewer asking those questions, which he supposedly doesn't know about, but he does know other things about it. So even when the viewers and the audience can tell me and say, yeah, but Kaden can only say this or that he's only talking about things he remembers or knows. But still, you ask somebody a question which they don't know, they may answer with something else or mention another point which you would have never have gotten if it wasn't for asking that question, right? So it is important. But I think these interviewers did well in this second part, this clip, this 10-minute section. If it was applied earlier on in the original interview, maybe more could have been brought out. But maybe with time, that's what will happen when catching up on stuff. So it's positive to see, right? I'd say there's a stark contrast between interview part 1, full length or most of it, and then comparing to the final 10 minutes of the second video. There's a big improvement, even though it's the same interview. And that's positive from both sides, Kaden and the partners in true crimes. Some of the key questions asked with alternative answers which we may have not heard of before. That's good, right? So what else is there to mention? Yeah, the only thing I would say is maybe you didn't hear or see because you were asleep the ATV situation. But if Noah was being brought in through the house, wouldn't that have made a noise or a commotion? Guess it depends if you're in a deep sleep or not. And sometimes alcohol, that can knock you out. But granted, when it came to Kaden Pressy, he was saying he sobered up. Unless he drunk again afterwards, I don't know. Context is lacking there. But the next thing that was mentioned was, and it was in response to the injury, the surgery to his knee or his leg, his meniscus muscle, his ACL being replaced for a boating accident situation. Where did it happen? At Warwicker Lake? I don't know if it did. Bloody hell, Warwicker Lake seems to be a bit of a bad luck area when you think about it with the context in the past. But nevertheless, what Kaden did add on was that because of that surgery, which was like a year ago, still with that knee brace on, very serious, long-term recovery, I'm guessing, or it already has been long enough, that when at the party, he described himself as a slow walker, couldn't do that much. Now, from what Kaden said about Sunday morning onwards, that Kaden did get up to a handful of things early in the morning, hanging out with some of the partygoers, key individuals, Jack, Noah, etc., at gas station getting food, then later going hunting, a lot of moving about, but granted, a lot of moving about in a vehicle, okay? At the party though, more stationary, you don't really see him in many shots, if not any. You see it from his point of view, where he sat down, relaxing and resting, but you get that idea that, yeah, you can be busy in a day, you can get a lot done. Don't mean say you have to be walking or moving, you can be sat down. whatever the situation, wherever you are, and if you're being transported along the way. So yeah, I do understand that. Okay. The next thing mentioned, and it ties back to this 5x5 accident incident. It's weird how people call it an accident, but maybe it's just, when you say words loosely, I get it. But the difference between an accident and an accident is where there's damage done to the person or people and or the property and items involved. An incident tends to be where there's no damage done to the person. As for the property or item, I'm not too sure about, can't remember. But how Jack described it, no damage to the vehicle, no damage to Noah. So basically that could be described as an incident, not an accident. But nevertheless, in addition to that supposed event, the interviewers, or more so Kaden, was talking about Stevie Howard. How at some point in the past, I don't know how long ago, on Facebook, Stevie Howard was accusing Kaden Pressy for being involved in one of the seats of the 5x5 accident, and that he also flipped it over as well, and that there is a video about it. Why make a big deal about it though? What's so important about that? Even if Kaden was involved in it, why is that so important for Stevie Howard to put out there? Are they trying to put across and twist it to say that Stevie Howard is suggesting that, yeah, Kaden was involved in the 5x5 accident, but in the driver's seat, he was the one that tipped it over. He's the one that could have done something to Noah. Is that what Stevie Howard was trying to do? Maybe, to twist it? Well, Kaden responded and said that he had no involvement to do with that situation, and likely, at the time of when it did happen, as I said earlier, he was asleep. And take in mind, he couldn't really do much either because of his leg injury, his brace, his surgery. So by flipping over a 5x5, a side-by-side, by flipping that over requires some kind of core leg strength to lift it, push it, roll it, right? Kaden wouldn't be able to do that. He's not that mobile. So that kind of dispels that quickly, even though Stevie Howard is saying that, oh yeah, Kaden flipped it over. But Kaden did say he reached out to Stevie and asked for video proof. If there is a video of it, he wants to see it because he's not aware of what he's done. He feels like he had no involvement whatsoever. He can't even remember it. And, there's different reasons as to why you can't remember it. One being because you weren't involved in the first place and you were asleep when it happened, such as, supposedly, with Kaden. So if Stevie Howard could provide the video to Kaden, even if it was in the background privately, for context, as proof, that would be good. But as Kaden said, it was ignored that they didn't do it. So maybe they didn't do it because Stevie Howard doesn't actually have a video of it. She's just saying it to try and twist the narrative elsewhere. That's probably the case. Now, the only other thing that was talked about was doing another interview not that long ago for Kaden to make sure his name's clear and his story is clear and accounted for so no one misunderstands it. Kaden said when he was being interviewed, he was allowed to record the conversation and interview himself, which is obviously a smart thing to do, could be used in the future as evidence maybe. And in terms of his phone, when he said, I'll hand it in, the authority didn't want his phone. And normally, if you provide evidence on a plate that easy, old evidence, new evidence, whenever, for whatever reason, they should gladly take it. But the fact that they said, oh, we don't want it, and no explanation was given, is as if, no, we don't want evidence. No, we don't want to make the task or the case at hand easier. No, we want less evidence. We want to drag things out. We want to delay stuff. We don't want to search things. We don't want any search warrants. We want as minimal effort as possible to make the cases longer and harder to solve so it never gets solved. That's how it could be interpreted in a way. So, all in all, how Kaden presented himself was a lot clearer, easier to understand, easier to follow. As for the consistency part, not much of an issue there because most of the stuff that was being talked about I've not really heard before. I've not heard it countered before. In time, if it is countered, well, we'll see how that goes. But for now, much better. And this is still all part of the first interview. If this final 10 minutes was in that first part of that interview with that first analysis that I did, I think it would have been more positive. right? But still, I guess it's good that it's broken down, so then I can just focus and lock in today to make this video. And speaking of, one of the key points which I highlighted about the porch being wet around 6 in the morning onwards, or at least when Kaden discovered that, what's that all about? Let's take a closer look with photos. So what we're looking at on screen is the front porch area, the main doorway. And whether it's got a back porch or not, the reason why I know this is the front is because when looking at the party footage itself, as it panned around later, you saw the barn or shed in the distance back there. And as we saw from that recent footage in 2024, it was all on the front, where the front porch was as well, and where the likes of Jasmine Milan was at. So it all matched up there. But for Kaden to say the concrete on the porch, are we saying that the porch where the bar is, the railing, the steps, is that a concrete surface? Are we saying that staircase, or whatever you want to call it, that platform of the porch specifically is concrete? Or are we saying near to the porch, this ground being concrete wet? I mean, when looking at it on screen right now, when zoomed in, the first thing that came to my mind was, that looks like a wet patch. It looks like a pool of water. Now, this footage was from Sunday, I believe, Sunday night. Let me just double check. No, it's not. It's Saturday. And the reason why that seems to be the case is because Noah was wearing khaki beige coloured shorts on the Saturday, the same day he was written on his body. Then Sunday being early hours of the morning when he made it back to his house and had a wash and washed most of the writing off, or the remnants were faded. Okay, then came Sunday. And there is footage of Sunday as well, as we saw on the near to the front porch, whether you call this a patio or not, just along the concrete ground, and it didn't look wet there unless maybe wetness was caused by a can or beer tipping over. I said there's numerous reasons which can explain why the ground would be wet, why the floor was wet, but that was tying it in with the questions in that interview as to, did you see Noah have a shower? Was anyone wet? And Kaden was like, no, but I did hear it mentioned earlier. But by the way, Monday morning around 6 a.m. onwards, when I was cleaning up at the house, the beer cans, I noticed that the porch, the concrete floor, was wet. So even this footage here, which could be seen as Saturday, and even if it's wet there, where you see the shiny surface reflection with the light nearby, okay, that could be wet at the time. But on Sunday, would it remain wet? On Monday, would it remain wet? Depends what the temperatures are like. If it's quite cool, cold, and not windy, less time for evaporation. If it's quite windy, that can cause a bit of evaporation. If it's a bit humid, warm, hot, that can dry things up pretty quick. And supposedly it was quite warm and humid at the time, hence why people were suggesting that if there was an ATV incident and it flipped over, the reason why Noah would need a wash is likely because dirt got on him. And with it being warm and humid and your body sweating, the dirt would stick to you, almost like Velcro. So you need to scrub it, wash it off. That's the only way around it. So with that being in mind, if what Kaden saw 6 a.m. onwards, Monday morning, that there was wetness on the ground or on the platform there of the porch, it must have been recent then. Because if it was Sunday earlier, or more so Saturday, it would have dried up by then. So, my question to you is, from Sunday evening, if Noah was to have a wash, or someone else did, and that's what caused the wetness, was there any footprints? Any wet footprints? Not from the looks of it. No wet footprints, it doesn't really lead in any direction. So what's going on there? And even if it was caused by a shower, it would mean someone would have had to gone inside first, then get wet, then come out, and then leave a big wet patch outside. Surely you would have left more wet patches inside, and by the time you get outside, you may have dried off, or you wouldn't be dripping as much. So maybe there is no link to a shower situation. Kaden wasn't specific. He gave an example saying that maybe someone was using a hose pipe, hosing something down. What, an outdoor shower? A prank played on somebody by using a hose pipe on one of the partygoers to get them wet? Maybe. But Kaden wasn't aware of the wet patch earlier or Sunday evening, right? Take in mind, in between Kaden going to sleep, so maybe the wet patch occurred when Kaden was asleep, maybe? But, such as at 5:15, was there a wet patch on the concrete ground then? 5:15 in the morning, like at roughly an hour or a bit before when Kaden noticed it when he got back to the house. Did the wet patch occur when Kaden was away from the house, when he returned back, or was it before 5:15 a.m.? He just didn't notice it at the time because he was in a hurry, a rush to get to the highway upon hearing the news of Noah's passing. It makes you think. I'm just highlighting all of this. Are there any hose pipes on site? I guess. For Kaden to mention it, there must have been a hose pipe somewhere. For what use? Well, I don't see any plants or flowers nearby, but maybe just to wash dust down, clean things, clean your car if it got a bit dirty. It's a normal thing to have a hose pipe and an outdoor tap or so. Is it in sight? Not from what I can see, but at least when we zoom in here, it does look wet on the ground, doesn't it? Like a pool of water. And take in mind, this isn't that relevant to what on the day of when Kaden saw wetness on the concrete, but this is the nearest thing we have. But there's a chance that maybe it's not water on the ground and it could be an object or an item dumped on the floor. It's just because of the colouring of it, how it appears a bit lighter, whether there's any reflections caused by the light nearby, even such as that one back there. I could be wrong, that might not be water, but whilst we're talking about the concrete area being wet, that could be an example of it. Now, Kaden said the concrete area wasn't flooded, there was no puddle, it was just wet. So maybe it has dried up since it was caused, but how was it caused? Who was it caused by? For Kaden to say a hose pipe may have been used, okay, at the party or later. Could that hose pipe have been used to wash any evidence away from golf clubs to Noah's body, or any bloodied prints, any DNA? You know, could any washing have occurred post-death of Noah Presgrove, or, in the process of it going on? Oh, let's wash all this away. Oh, yeah, we could take it to a pond. We could take it here to wash it away, to wash off stuff. But why not just use the hose pipe, what we've got? We've got a water source. Why not use that? That's a possibility, right? Just a theory there. Let me know what you think about it. What else could have caused the wetness at some point? Someone spilling a drink. It can happen, right? At the end of the day, I know people can say a wet patch on the concrete near the porch or on the porch, it's not that deep. It's not a big deal. It doesn't really matter. But considering there is discussion and mystery behind Noah having a shower, at what time did it happen? Did it truly happen? Is there video proof of it? Questions regarding that. Could this wet patch link to it, reinforce or debunk it? Could this wet patch link, reinforce or debunk possible evidence DNA being washed away? Not inside, but outside the house. Questions like that, no harm in asking. Now, the next one what we have is Jasmine Milan on the porch. You see the white railing, you see the door behind her. Where she was stood was there, okay? How significant is that? Well, where she was stood there was at 3:41 a.m, 11 minutes after Noah supposedly left the property. And Jasmine said, well, I guess he's missing. Not much done was about it at the time because it was seen as harmless. They weren't anticipating him to truly go missing and then to end up the way he did, as described by Jasmine Milan, at least. But how significant is this post? Well, originally I was putting the possible case across that when you look at her hair, such as, sorry for zooming in, but when you look at the hair there, the strands of it, it looks a bit darker, looks a bit patchy and wet. The way the hair kind of like sticks together as well on the side of the face, it looks wet. When you look at her shirt, there are wet patches visible, darker near the shoulder area where hair would normally brush against. And if your hair's wet and it makes contact with your shirt, it could dampen it. If there's water running down, trickling down your face or hair, it could collect on the shoulder area, hence why it got wet. Other people, some said, that's not wetness from having a wash or anything like that. That could be wetness from spilling a drink. Wetness from eating greasy food. But why are you touching yourself on your shoulder and stuff? Maybe you got an itch or a scratch, maybe, but I'm just thinking of hygiene, and if you got greasy hands, dirty hands, why are you touching all things? Probably because you're not really thinking at the time and you don't really care, maybe. But I don't know, it depends, what people's standards or food habits are like when they eat, and, we don't need to get too deep into that, but you know what I'm saying? Just like as this idea that Kaden, he saw himself, there was a wet patch on the concrete near or on the porchway just outside. What caused it? Was it hours before Jasmine Milan wetting the ground? Possibly. From 3:41 a.m. to 6 in the morning onwards, would there still been wetness, or would it have dried up real quick based off the temperature? If the temperature was very warm, humid, and things dry up very quick, well then that wetness must have been caused not that long before. And then when Kaden saw himself. Could it have been caused by Renee Milan when coming in, or if something was spilled on the way out? I don't know. It's just trying to understand it, right? Because there's material here, there's stuff to work with, it's all within the same area, and that's what makes it good. So you can take a look at it up close. I think one thing to acknowledge is, in the background as example, you've got a person sat down on a green object just with the back against the railing of the porch. What is that green object? Is it a bucket? Is it a box? Hose pipe? Does anyone know? I don't know who that person is because it's very blurry, but they're sat on something. And then in this image, you can still see sat on something, and then two guys back there. The weird thing was, and it was only when I looked out quick, I thought the guy back there was holding a handgun, and then the guy to the side was pointing a rifle at the camera. It's just because of the arm positioning in the footage when I paused it, but I don't think that's the case. It just looked dodgy when I looked out quick, because the way the guy's hand was, it looked like he had something in his hand, long and black, so like a firearm, but I doubt it. As for the blonde person down the left is Shandy. I have no clue how you spell their name. If anyone can spell it down below, that would probably be quite helpful in the future. But this was Saturday when Noah was getting slapped by her. Then on Sunday getting slapped by Brylan. A bit further down where those guys are at. And then behind Shandy, which you can't see, is that barn and shed. Right? So it's all within the same area, but as for the wetness on the ground, it's kind of hard to tell. But wetness does show when you've got like concrete, hard surface. What we can do, I'm just going to try and clear up the image if it's even possible. You see that lightness, the way it reflects? That tends to happen when there's like light, there's a light source, or light is reflecting off a wet surface, it makes it shiny. Highlight. You can clearly see that there is a patch there, whether that be a wet patch or something else. And take in mind, this isn't the same possible wet patch which Kaden saw Monday morning, but I'm just using this as an example because it's the closest thing that we have. Yes, it's not on the porch, but it's right by the side of it, more so in front. Do we have the sharpness tool? I mean, it kind of clears it up in a way. Surprising what you can do. So I'll just leave it as that for now because there's only so much you can do when editing. And then there's Jasmine Milan. So, do you think the wet patch on the porch is significant at all? Does it link to a shower situation? Does it link to Noah? Does it link to any DNA being washed away? Or is it more simple as it happened at the party and it remained wet for some time? Let me know down below. Hopefully you found this video interesting and hopefully you were notified about it. We'll see what happens next. Be sure to like and share this video so more people get to see it and see it from a bit more of a balanced, positive side when it comes to Kaden Pressy. Considering the first time round, it was very critical and focused. This time round is looking at it from a different side. Just like how I did when it came to Jasmine Milan, we looked at a dark side or a bit of a questionable side, then we looked at a positive side. It's the same for other people along the way. If there's stuff to look at, then that's what will be done. There are videos I need to catch up on, and there's like video request from some people out there. I know I'll get to that with time. I'll see what is the next thing that needs to be covered. I just wanted to get this out the way first, and then maybe we can expand on it in the future. But for now, let's leave it there. Leave all your comments, thoughts, and questions down below. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.